For 15 years, Rosa Martinez thought she knew every customer who walked through the doors of Martinez Corner Market. But the woman who taught her the most about business never actually bought anything. She just counted coins she couldn't afford to spend, until Rosa realized that some sales aren't about money at all. As Rosa sat across from Jimmy Fallon in the Tonight Show studio, her hands still moved as if she were counting change, muscle memory from a decade and a half of serving a neighborhood that had become more than customers. They had become family. Rosa Martinez, 52, smoothed her navy blue dress nervously as the studio lights illuminated her face. She wore her grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she'd saved for special occasions during the 15 years she'd owned Martinez Corner Market in East Harlem. Her hands, permanently stained with newsprint from handling newspapers and slightly scarred from countless box-cutting accidents, rested carefully in her lap. Tonight, she was here because a local news story about her store's closing had gone viral, specifically focusing on why she'd decided to shut down what neighbors called the heart of the block. "So Rosa," Jimmy said, settling into his familiar interview rhythm. 15 years running a corner store in East Harlem. That's not just a business, that's like being the mayor of your block, right? Rosa's nervous energy began to ease as she found her voice, her English accented but confident. "Oh, Jimmy, you have no idea. I knew everyone's kids' names, their favorite snacks, who needed their lottery tickets, who forgot their keys and needed to use my phone. Mrs. Chen comes every morning for her coffee and newspaper, always exact change. Tommy from down the street, he's been buying the same candy bar after school since he was 8. Now he's 23 and still comes by." The audience smiled warmly and Jimmy leaned forward with genuine interest. "That's what I love about corner stores. They're like the living room of the neighborhood." Exactly. People don't just come for milk and bread. They come to talk, to feel connected. During the blackout in 2019, my store became like a community center. I had candles, people gathered, we shared stories. That's when I realized I wasn't just selling products, I was selling belonging. Jimmy's expression grew more thoughtful. "And you've watched the neighborhood change over 15 years? I see so much change. When I first opened, the rent was manageable. The customers were mostly families who'd lived here for generations. Now with gentrification, the rent tripled, and half my regular customers had to move to the Bronx or Queens because they couldn't afford to live here anymore. That must have been heartbreaking to watch." Rosa's smile dimmed slightly. "It was, but you know what? The new people who moved in, they needed community too. Young professionals working long hours, they'd come in tired and stressed. I'd remember how they liked their coffee, ask about their day. Rich or poor, everyone needs someone to remember their name." Jimmy nodded, clearly moved by her perspective. "What was the hardest part about deciding to close the store?" Rosa's hands stilled in her lap, and something in the studio atmosphere shifted. The warm conversation took on a heavier weight as Rosa looked down, then back up at Jimmy, with eyes that carried the burden of a difficult choice. "The hardest part wasn't the money, though that was difficult. The hardest part was telling my customers that I was giving up on them. But I realized something that changed everything about how I see success." Jimmy sensed there was a deeper story here. "What changed your perspective?" Rosa took a deep breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried the careful cadence of someone who had been wrestling with a profound realization. "Can I tell you about a customer? About someone who taught me what my store was really for? About why I realized that closing might not be giving up, but giving forward?" Behind the cameras, producers felt the familiar shift that signaled an interview was about to transcend entertainment. Jimmy, without hesitation, nodded. "Of course, Rosa. Whatever you want to share." Rosa's voice grew quieter, more purposeful. "Her name was Angela Rodriguez, but not related to me, just the same last name. She was maybe 28, 29, with 2 little kids, Sophia, who was 6, and Miguel, who was 4. The studio audience was attentive, sensing they were about to hear something meaningful. Angela worked 2 jobs, cleaned offices at night, worked at a laundromat during the day. Single mother, you know? The father wasn't in the picture. She lived in one of the rent-controlled apartments 3 blocks away. The kind that's falling apart, but it's all you can afford." Jimmy found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed. Every Tuesday and Friday, like clockwork, Angela would come in around 8 p.m. with the kids. Sophia would hold Miguel's hand, and they'd walk straight to the milk section. Angela would pick up a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, Maybe some eggs if she was lucky. Rosa paused, her eyes filling with memory. But here's the thing, Jimmy. Every single time, Angela would stand at the counter and count her money. Quarters, dimes, nickels, pennies. Counting twice, sometimes 3 times, making sure she had enough. The studio was growing quieter, everyone understanding that they were witnessing something profound. And sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she'd count, recount, and then put something back. Usually the eggs. Sometimes she'd have to choose between the milk and the bread. Jimmy's expression had shifted completely. This wasn't entertainment anymore. I watched this beautiful, proud woman trying to feed her children on whatever coins she could scrape together, and I realized that my cash register was becoming a place of shame for her instead of service. Rosa wiped her eyes with a tissue. One Friday night, I watched her count her money 3 times, and I could see in her face that she didn't have enough for both the milk and the bread. Sophia was holding Miguel's hand, and both kids were looking up at their mother, waiting. The audience was completely silent now, understanding the weight of the moment Rosa was describing. Angela started to put the milk back, and I said, "Wait." I told her it was a promotion day. Buy bread, get milk free. Of course, there was no such promotion, but I needed to give her dignity. Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, driven by an instinct that had nothing to do with television production and everything to do with recognizing something sacred when you hear it. "Rosa, you gave her so much more than groceries." "But that's not the end of the story," Rosa continued, tears flowing freely now. "After that, I started paying attention, really paying attention. I realized that Angela wasn't the only one. There were others. Mrs. Washington, who counted pills to afford food. Pedro, who worked construction but got paid irregularly. Families choosing between phone bills and dinner. Jimmy walked around his desk and sat on the edge, eliminating the barrier between them. "What did you do?" "I started creating promotions. Buy one, get one free. Customer appreciation discounts. Lucky customer of the day specials. Whatever it took to let people leave my store with what they needed and their dignity intact." Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook, worn from use. "I kept track, not for money, but to understand the need. In the last 3 years, I gave away over $40,000 worth of food and necessities." The audience began to stir, not with restlessness, but with the kind of emotion that demands expression. "Jimmy, I realized that my store wasn't just a business. It was a lifeline. But I also realized that I couldn't sustain it anymore. The rent increases, the wholesale price increases, the fact that I was essentially running a food bank disguised as a corner store." Jimmy looked at the notebook, then back at Rosa with profound respect. "So, you decided to close rather than stop helping people." "I decided to evolve," Rosa said, her voice growing stronger. "I couldn't keep pretending to run a profitable business when what I was really running was a community service. So, I made a choice." Jimmy slid off his desk and knelt down beside Rosa's chair, understanding that some moments require you to meet people where they are. "What choice did you make?" "I talked to a nonprofit organization that works with food insecurity in East Harlem. I donated all my equipment, my relationships with wholesalers, my customer knowledge, to help them open a community food pantry in the same location." The audience rose to their feet, not in orchestrated applause, but in spontaneous recognition of something profound. They weren't clapping for entertainment, they were bearing witness to transformation. Jimmy stood up and turned to face the audience and cameras. "Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where business success is measured in profit margins and growth. Rosa Martinez reminds us that sometimes the most successful thing you can do is admit that your real mission is bigger than your business model." He turned back to Rosa. "You said Angela taught you what your store was really for. What did she teach you?" "She taught me that hunger doesn't care about your pride, but dignity matters more than food. She taught me that my job wasn't to sell groceries. It was to make sure families could eat without shame." Jimmy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his business card, but this gesture felt different from all the others. It felt like a recognition between two people who understood service in its deepest form. "Rosa, I want you to have this. Not because you're a guest, but because you understand something that every business owner needs to learn. That success isn't about what you keep, but what you give away." Rosa took the card with hands that had counted thousands of transactions, hands that had chosen dignity over profit countless times. You know what I learned from Angela and all my customers? I learned that the best sales are the ones where everybody wins, even when no money changes hands. The show ended differently that night. No desk pieces, no games, no comedy segments. Just Jimmy and Rosa talking about community, about the profound impact of choosing service over profit, about how the most ordinary businesses can become extraordinary missions when guided by love. 3 months later, the Martinez Corner market space reopened as the Rosa's Table Community Food Pantry. Angela was the first person in line, not as someone receiving charity, but as the volunteer coordinator Rosa had recommended for the position. The pantry operates on Rosa's principle: everyone shops with dignity, everything is free, and everyone leaves knowing they matter. Rosa uses her savings and the money from selling her store equipment to help train other small business owners in dignity commerce, business practices that prioritize human dignity alongside profit. She travels to corner stores, bodegas, and small markets, teaching owners how to serve their communities while sustaining their businesses. The viral video that brought Rosa to The Tonight Show wasn't actually of her closing day. It was taken 6 months later at the food pantry's grand opening, showing Angela teaching new volunteers how to create shopping experiences that preserve dignity. In the video, Angela explains, "Rosa taught me that receiving help doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." The episode became one of the most watched Tonight Show segments in history, not because it was funny, but because it reminded viewers that heroism exists in the choice to see beyond transactions to relationships, to understand that every customer carries invisible burdens that only compassion can address. Rosa still lives in East Harlem, now working part-time at the food pantry she helped create. Her apartment walls are covered with photos: Angela's daughter Sophia graduating high school with honors, Miguel playing soccer in his school uniform, Mrs. Chen teaching cooking classes at the community center, Pedro starting his own construction business. The old cash register from Martinez Corner Market sits in Rosa's living room, not as a relic of the past, but as a reminder of what she learned: that the most important transactions can't be recorded in any register, that some sales are measured in smiles rather than dollars, that the best profit is the one shared with others. Jimmy learned something that night that changed his entire approach to late-night television: that the most powerful stories aren't always the ones that make people laugh. Sometimes they're the ones that remind us that ordinary people making extraordinary choices to put humanity before profit are the real foundation of community. The Tonight Show continued to entertain millions, but now it also served as a platform for recognizing that every interaction we have with others is an opportunity to choose dignity over convenience, to remember that the person across the counter might be counting more than money. They might be counting on your kindness. Because Rosa Martinez taught Jimmy Fallon and millions of viewers that true success isn't measured in what you accumulate, but in what you're willing to sacrifice for others. That the most profitable day of business might be the day you realize that people matter more than profit margins. Angela still shops at Rosa's Table every Tuesday and Friday, now with her children who volunteer alongside her, teaching other kids that helping others isn't charity, it's community. Sophia, now in high school, wants to study business to learn how to create more stores like Rosa's, places where commerce and compassion work together. The impact of Rosa's story extended beyond East Harlem. Corner store owners across New York began implementing dignity promotions, understanding that sustainable business sometimes means choosing community sustainability over pure profit. The Rosa Martinez model became a business school case study. Miguel, Angela's son, now 12, wrote a school essay about Rosa. "Mrs. Rosa taught my mom that asking for help isn't giving up. It's giving others a chance to be good people." That essay was read at the city council meeting that awarded Rosa the Community Hero designation. Wendy E's old cash register from Martinez Corner. Market sits in Rosa's living room, not as a relic of the past, but as a reminder of what she learned: that the most important transactions can't be recorded in any register, that some sales are measured in smiles rather than dollars, that the best profit is the one shared with others. Every morning, Rosa walks past the space that used to be her store and is now Rosa's Table, watching families shop with dignity, where she once struggled with rising rents. She sees Angela organizing volunteers, Mrs. Chen teaching cooking classes, Pedro's crew maintaining the building for free, and realizes that closing her store was actually her most successful business decision. And Rosa, she watches families shop with dignity in the space where she once worried about rent, understanding finally that she hadn't failed at business. She had succeeded at something far more important. She had learned how to transform a store into a sanctuary, customers into family, and transactions into acts of love.